Maya Chen's feet ached as she balanced 3 plates along her arm, a skill perfected over 2 years of double shifts at Sunrise Diner. The familiar scent of coffee and pancakes hung in the air as afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, catching dust particles that danced in its golden beams. "Order up for table 6, she called, her voice carrying the cheerfulness she didn't feel after working since 5 a.m. At 24, Maya had the tired eyes of someone much older. Dark circles had become permanent fixtures beneath them, souvenirs from countless nights spent studying after work, her nursing textbooks propped open beside a mug of reheated coffee. Every tip, every extra hour, all of it went into her someday fund for nursing school. The Tuesday afternoon lull had settled over the diner, with only a few regulars scattered among the red vinyl booths. Maya glanced at the clock. 2 more hours until her shift ended, then a quick change before heading to her second job, cleaning offices downtown. She rolled her shoulders back, trying to ease the knot of tension that had taken up permanent residence there. The distinct purr of a luxury engine caught her attention. Through the streaky front windows, she watched a sleek black car pull into the small parking lot. Something expensive and European that looked wildly out of place in their small town. "Looks like we've got company," Doris, the 60-something hostess, muttered. "And fancy company at that." The car door opened, and a tall man in a tailored suit emerged. His face wore the stern, distracted expression of someone perpetually late for important meetings. He opened the rear door with careful precision, and Maya watched as he unfolded a specialized wheelchair and helped a young boy into it. The bell above the door jingled as they entered, the man pushing the wheelchair with stiff movements that suggested unfamiliarity with the task. The boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, had a mop of unruly brown hair and bright eyes that darted around the diner with interest. "Table for 2, please," the man said, his voice deep and clipped. Doris led them to the corner booth by the window, one that could accommodate the wheelchair. Maya noticed how the man sat across from the boy rather than beside him, his posture rigid as he studied the laminated menu. "That's Richard Harrington," Doris whispered as she passed Maya. "The tech billionaire with the vacation property up on Cedar Hill. Never seen him in here before." Maya nodded, grabbing her notepad before approaching their table. Up close, she noticed the boy's movements, the way his arms sometimes made unexpected gestures, how his head occasionally tilted to one side. Cerebral palsy, she thought, recognizing the signs from her pre-nursing studies. "Welcome to Sunrise Diner," she said warmly. "I'm Maya, and I'll be your server today. Can I start you off with something to drink?" The man, Mr. Harrington, barely looked up from his menu. "Coffee, black." And he glanced at the boy, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "Apple juice for my son, Theo. With a straw, please." As Maya wrote down their order, Theo made an excited sound, his hand moving in what seemed like a random gesture. Mr. Harrington's brow furrowed. "Not apple juice?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration. Theo responded with another sound, his eyes fixed on something behind Maya. Maya followed his gaze to the chalkboard, showcasing the day's specials. "I think he might want the strawberry milkshake," she said gently. "Is that right, Theo?" Theo's face lit up, and he made an affirmative motion. Something like surprise flashed across Mr. Harrington's features. "Yes, I suppose that's what he wants," he said, a note of bewilderment in his voice. "1 strawberry milkshake coming up." Maya smiled directly at Theo. "Would you like whipped cream on top?" Theo's enthusiastic response made her laugh. "I'll take that as a definite yes." As Maya walked away to get their drinks, she felt Mr. Harrington's eyes following her. When she returned with the coffee and milkshake, She noticed how he watched her place the straw in the perfect position for Theo, how she instinctively knew to put the glass where his more controlled left hand could reach it. "Are you ready to order?" she asked. "I'll have the club sandwich," Mr. Harrington said, then hesitated as Theo made another sound, his eyes fixed on the menu's pictures. "I think Theo might want the pancakes with the smiley face made of fruit," Maya suggested, interpreting his expression. "Is that right?" The joy on Theo's face was unmistakable. Mr. Harrington looked from his son to Maya with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, something between confusion and wonder. "Yes, the pancakes," he confirmed quietly. "Thank you." As Maya walked away to place their order, she felt the weight of Mr. Harrington's gaze again, more intense now. She'd seen that look before on parents' faces, the surprise when someone outside the family understood their child, even in small ways. What she didn't expect was how it would continue throughout their meal, his eyes following her every movement as she helped Theo with his food, chatting easily with the boy as though they were old friends, and she certainly didn't expect to see them again the very next day, requesting her section specifically. "They're back," Doris announced with a meaningful arch of her eyebrow. "And they're asking for you specifically." Maya looked up from refilling salt shakers to see the sleek black car pulling into the parking lot again. Sure enough, there was Richard Harrington in another expensive suit, carefully helping Theo from the car. "Table 7 is open," Doris said. "Your section, just like they wanted." Maya smoothed down her apron and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Something about Mr. Harrington's intense stare made her nervous, though Theo's bright smile as they entered warmed her heart immediately. "Welcome back," she greeted them, already reaching for a booster cushion to help position Theo more comfortably in the booth. "Same drinks as yesterday? Coffee and a strawberry milkshake?" Theo made an excited sound, and Mr. Harrington nodded. "Yes, thank you." As Maya walked away to get their drinks, she felt that watchful gaze again. When she returned, she caught Mr. Harrington studying her as she placed Theo's milkshake in easy reach and showed him how to hold the special straw. "How did you know?" he asked suddenly. "Know what, sir?" "What he wanted yesterday. What he was trying to say." His voice wasn't accusatory, just genuinely curious. Maya shrugged. "I have a cousin with autism. Different, I know. But I learned to pay attention to expressions, to the little things. And Theo has very expressive eyes." She smiled at the boy, who was happily sipping his milkshake. Plus, who wouldn't want a strawberry milkshake? That earned her the smallest curve of Mr. Harrington's lips. Not quite a smile, but close. They ordered the same food as yesterday. As they waited, Maya noticed how Mr. Harrington seemed to be trying to engage with Theo, but his attempts were stiff, uncertain. When their food arrived, Theo struggled with his fork, and Maya saw frustration building in his eyes. "Would you mind if I helped?" she asked, directing the question to both of them. Mr. Harrington nodded, and Maya pulled up a chair. She gently guided Theo's hand, showing him how to scoop the pancake pieces. "There you go," she encouraged as he successfully brought food to his mouth. "Perfect." The joy on Theo's face was matched only by the wonder on his father's. Maya felt Mr. Harrington watching her every move, how she spoke directly to Theo rather than about him, how she waited patiently between bites, how she celebrated each small success. He was always closer to his mother, Mr. Harrington said, quietly, when Theo was focused on eating. She knew exactly what he needed, what he was trying to say. Since she passed. He trailed off, his eyes fixed on his untouched sandwich. "I'm sorry for your loss," Maya said gently. Mr. Harrington nodded once, sharply, as if acknowledging the sympathy, but unwilling to explore it further. "Hey, isn't that the billionaire guy?" Maya heard Kendra, another waitress, whisper too loudly to the cook. "The one who owns that tech company? Harrington something?" "Shh," the cook hissed back. "He probably owns half this town by now." Maya pretended not to hear, focusing instead on helping Theo with his drink. But she noticed how Mr. Harrington's shoulders tensed at the whispers, how he seemed to retreat further behind an invisible wall. As lunch progressed, something remarkable happened. Theo laughed, a bright musical sound that caused his father's head to snap up in surprise. Maya had been making silly faces while wiping strawberry syrup from Theo's chin. "I haven't heard that in a while," Mr. Harrington admitted, a new softness in his voice. When it was time to leave, Mr. Harrington placed a credit card on the table without looking at the bill. Maya processed the payment and returned with his receipt. "There seems to be a mistake," she said, pointing to the tip line where he'd written an amount larger than the meal itself. "There's no mistake," he replied, already standing to help Theo with his wheelchair. "But sir, this is fair compensation for exceptional service." He cut her off, his tone businesslike again. "We'll see you tomorrow, Ms. Chen." Maya blinked in surprise, both at the enormous tip and the fact that he'd noticed her last name on her small name tag. As they left, she watched through the window as Mr. Harrington carefully secured Theo in the car. His movements were still awkward, but there was something different in the way he spoke to his son now, leaning closer, paying more attention to Theo's expressions. Back inside, Doris sidled up beside her. "Looks like you've made quite an impression on our local billionaire." Maya shook her head. "I think it's Theo who made the impression on me." But as she pocketed the generous tip, enough to cover her textbook for next semester, she couldn't help wondering what tomorrow's visit would bring and why this wealthy, powerful man seemed so lost when it came to connecting with his own son. True to his word, Richard Harrington returned the next day with Theo, and the day after that. By the end of the week, their arrival at 12:30 sharp had become a highlight of Maya's shift. The other waitresses now automatically directed them to Maya's section, and Doris no longer bothered announcing their arrival. "The usual?" Maya asked on Friday, already placing a straw in Theo's milkshake glass. Richard nodded, but Theo made a different sound, his hands moving in a new pattern. Maya paused, studying his expression. "Something different today?" she asked him directly. Theo nodded, his eyes bright with excitement. "He wants to try something new?" Richard asked, clearly impressed by her understanding. Maya crouched down to Theo's eye level. "The special today is grilled cheese with tomato soup. Is that what you'd like to try?" Theo's enthusiastic response made her laugh. "One grilled cheese and tomato soup coming up. We'll cut the sandwich into dippable strips, okay?" As she walked away, she heard Richard asking Theo, "How does she always know?" The wonder in his voice made her smile. When she returned with their drinks, Richard cleared his throat. "We're staying at my Cedar Hill property while I handle some business remotely," he explained, though she hadn't asked. "It's a large development project downtown. We'll be here for at least another month." Maya nodded politely, wondering why the billionaire felt the need to explain himself to her. "I don't usually use the vacation house," he continued, stirring his coffee unnecessarily. "Elise, my wife, she loved it there. After we lost her, I couldn't." He trailed off, then straightened his shoulders. But Theo's specialists thought a change of environment might be beneficial. "It's beautiful, up on Cedar Hill," Maya offered. "The views of the lake must be amazing." "Theo seems to enjoy watching the birds on the water," Richard admitted. "Something so simple. Yet I never would have thought." Their food arrived, saving him from finishing the thought. Maya showed Theo how to dip the grilled cheese strips into the soup, earning another delighted laugh from the boy. She noticed how Richard observed carefully, then mimicked her technique, helping Theo with the next piece. The awkwardness in his movements was still there, but less pronounced now. "You're doing great," she encouraged, not sure if she was speaking to Theo or his father. By the third strip of sandwich, Richard had figured out the right angle to hold it for Theo, and the pride in both their eyes made Maya's heart swell. "You're a natural," she told Richard, who looked up in surprise. "Hardly," he scoffed. "Everything I know about connecting with my son, I've learned by watching you this week." Maya blushed and stepped away to check on her other tables. When she returned, Richard was asking Theo about the birds they'd seen that morning, actually, waiting for his son's nonverbal responses before continuing. "Maya, 1 coffee refill, please," Doris called from the counter. As Maya moved to get the coffee pot, she heard snippets of conversation from the kitchen. "Third job this month canceled on me," the dishwasher, Luis, was saying. "Don't know how? I'm gonna make rent." "Tell me about it," Maya replied, grabbing the coffee. "I'm covering Janelle's office cleaning shift tonight after my shift here ends. 4th double this week." "You're still doing that nursing program too, right?" Luis asked. "Online. Classes," Maya confirmed. "Late nights and early mornings. The American dream, right?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. What she didn't notice was Richard Harrington watching her, his keen eyes taking in her slouched shoulders and the exhaustion she tried to hide. Saturday brought rain, but the Harringtons still appeared, at their usual time. Theo was excited to show Maya a drawing he'd made, stick figures on what looked like a beach. "Is this you and your dad?" Maya asked, genuinely touched. "And you," Richard said quietly, pointing to the third figure. "He insisted on bringing it for you." Maya's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. "Thank you, Theo. I love it." She carefully tucked the drawing into her apron pocket. "I'll put it on my refrigerator at home." Later, as they were finishing their meal, Maya overheard Richard on his phone, his voice tense. "The meeting can wait, Marcus. My son takes priority. No, I won't be back in the city by Monday. You'll have to handle it. I don't care what the shareholders think." He hung up with a frustrated sigh, then noticed Maya watching. "Business partners who think money is more important than family," he explained tersely. Maya nodded in understanding. "I guess some problems are universal, no matter your tax bracket." That earned her an actual smile, the first real one she'd seen from him. It transformed his stern face, revealing laugh lines and a warmth she hadn't known existed beneath his cool exterior. Sunday morning, Maya's alarm failed to wake her. She jolted awake 2 hours late, her body finally surrendering to the exhaustion of working 80 hours that week while studying. Racing to the diner, she arrived breathless and apologetic. "Don't worry about it," Doris said, concern in her eyes. "We covered your section. But honey, you look terrible." "Thanks," Maya laughed weakly, tying on her apron with shaking hands. "The Harringtons came in," Doris continued. "The boys seemed really disappointed you weren't here. The father asked when. Your shift ends today." "That's weird," Maya said, fighting a wave of dizziness. By afternoon, Maya could barely stay on her feet. The room swam before her eyes as she carried plates to table 12. She felt the tray slipping from her grasp, heard the crash of breaking dishes, and then nothing as the floor rushed up to meet her. When Doris called the Harringtons' table to say Maya wouldn't be in for the next few days due to exhaustion and a mild case of flu, she didn't expect Richard Harrington to demand Maya's address. She certainly didn't expect what would happen next. Maya's apartment building stood in stark contrast to the manicured estates of Cedar Hill. Paint peeled from the weathered siding, and the stairwell smelled of mildew and old cooking oil. Richard Harrington stood in the hallway, his tailored suit looking as out of place as a peacock in a chicken coop. He checked the crumpled paper in his hand, apartment 3B, then glanced at the dented door before him. Theo waited in the car with his regular caretaker, Ms. Patel, who had flown in that morning at Richard's urgent request. Richard knocked, the sound echoing in the narrow hallway. "Coming!" a hoarse voice called, followed by a fit of coughing. Satayid. Door opened to reveal Maya wrapped in a threadbare robe, her hair tangled, dark circles under her eyes more pronounced than ever. She stared at him in disbelief. "Mr. Harrington? What are you? How did you? Why are you here?" "May I come in?" he asked, glancing uncomfortably at the thin walls separating her apartment from the neighbors. Maya hesitated, then stepped back, tightening her robe. "It's not much," she said, embarrassment coloring her voice. Not much was an understatement. The apartment was tiny, a combined living room and kitchen, with 2 doors presumably leading to bedrooms. Every surface served multiple purposes. The coffee table covered with textbooks was also a dining table. The couch, lined with folded laundry, clearly doubled as someone's bed. "I share with 2 roommates," Maya explained, hastily clearing a spot for him to sit. "They're at work." Richard remained standing, taking in the water stain spreading across the ceiling, the patched window sealed with duct tape, the single space heater trying valiantly to warm the drafty room. Doris from the diner said, "You collapsed," he began. "It's just a bug, plus exhaustion," Maya said, sinking onto the couch. "I'll be fine in a day or 2. "You're working yourself to death," Richard stated bluntly. 2 jobs plus school is not sustainable." Maya's chin lifted defiantly. "With all due respect, Mr. Harrington, my work schedule is none of your business." "I'd like to make it my business," he replied. "I want to hire you." Maya blinked. "Hire? Me? For what?" "As Theo's companion and caretaker," Richard said, straightening his already straight tie. "The position would pay triple what you make at both your current jobs combined." Maya stared at him for a long moment. "You want me to quit school and be your son's nanny?" "Not a nanny," Richard corrected quickly. "A specialized caretaker. You have a gift with him. You understand him in ways that even his professional therapists don't. I've never seen him connect with anyone like he connects with you, not since his mother. Mr. Harrington, you would have your own suite at the Cedar Hill house," he continued, warming to his pitch. "Full benefits, paid vacation, use of a company car." "Mr. Harrington," Maya interrupted more firmly, "I'm working toward becoming a pediatric nurse. I've been saving for 3 years. I'm not going to abandon my dream to become someone's servant, no matter how well it pays." Richard's expression hardened. "I'm not offering you a servant's position. I'm offering you a life of comfort, doing something you're clearly good at, with compensation most people would jump at." "I'm not most people," Maya said quietly, "and I think you should leave now." The muscle in Richard's jaw twitched. Used to people eagerly accepting whatever he offered, her rejection felt like a personal affront. Without another word, he strode to the door and left, the walls vibrating as he slammed it behind him. Maya collapsed back on the couch, wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. The next day, she dragged herself to class despite still feeling weak. Her professor's voice blurred as she fought to stay awake, scribbling notes that made less and less sense as the lecture progressed. When class ended, she found herself dreading her evening shift at the diner. She had just finished changing into her uniform when a familiar sleek car pulled into the parking lot. Richard Harrington emerged, alone this time. Maya watched through the window as he paced beside his car for a moment, seeming to gather himself before entering. The bell jingled, and he scanned the diner until he spotted her. When he approached, his expression was different, less commanding, more uncertain. 5 minutes of your time, he said. Please. Doris nodded at Maya to go ahead, and she reluctantly followed Richard to a corner booth. I apologize for yesterday, he began, surprising her. You were right to refuse my offer. Maya waited, unsure where this was going. I've been thinking about what you said, Richard continued, about your dream of becoming a nurse. I have a new proposition. He slid a folder across the table. I will pay for your complete nursing education, tuition, books, fees, everything. In exchange, I ask for 15 hours a week of your time working with Theo, on a schedule that accommodates your classes. Maya stared at the folder without opening it. Why would you do that? Richard's gaze dropped to his hands. Because in 1 week, you've done more for my son than an army of specialists has done in 2 years. Because he lights up when he sees you. Because... He hesitated. Because I want to learn what you know. I want you to teach me how to connect with my own son. The naked vulnerability in his eyes caught Maya off guard. This wasn't the arrogant billionaire from yesterday? What exactly would I be doing in those 15 hours? She asked cautiously. Spending time with Theo, showing me how you communicate with him, helping me understand his world. Richard leaned forward. This isn't charity, Maya. It's a business arrangement that benefits us both. You get your education funded, and I get... He paused, struggling to find the right words. I get a chance to be a real father to my son. Maya opened the folder. Inside was a detailed contract, along with brochures for the top nursing program in the state. A program she could never have afforded on her own. I have conditions, she said finally. My education comes first. I set firm boundaries around my time. And this arrangement is trial-based. Either of us can end it if it's not working. Richard nodded, relief flooding his features. All reasonable. Terms. And one more thing, Maya added. I'm not your employee, answering to your every whim. We're partners in Theo's care. Richard extended his hand. Partners. As Maya shook it, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just stepped onto a path that would change her life forever, though she had no idea how completely. The Cedar Hill estate took Maya's breath away. Perched on a wooded bluff overlooking the lake, the vacation home was larger than her entire apartment building. Floor-to-ceiling windows captured sweeping views, while stone fireplaces and warm wood accents made the massive space feel surprisingly cozy. The guest house is through here, Richard said, leading her along a flagstone path that wound through carefully tended gardens. Guest house turned out to be a generous understatement for the charming cottage with its own deck facing the water. Inside, Maya found a fully furnished living space bigger than any apartment she'd ever dreamed of renting. Fresh flowers sat on the dining table beside a welcome basket. This is too much, she protested. It's been sitting empty for years, Richard replied simply. Theo's room is in the main house, second floor. Your first official day starts tomorrow, but take today to settle in. That night, Maya sat on her new deck watching the sunset paint the lake golden. The enormity of the change in her circumstances left her dizzy. Just 3 days ago, she'd been unconscious on the diner floor, her body finally rebelling against her punishing schedule. Now, she was living in a lakeside cottage with her education fully funded. It seemed too good to be true. Morning came with a gentle knock on her door. Theo sat in his wheelchair on the porch, a wide smile on his face, and an iPad mounted to his chair. "Good morning, Theo," Maya beamed, genuinely happy to see him. "Is your dad with you?" Theo shook his head, then tapped at his iPad. A computerized voice said, "Ms. Patel brought me. Dad is on a call." "You can talk with this?" Maya asked, delighted. "That's amazing!" Theo's eyes shone as he tapped again. "Sometimes. Hard to use. Prefer other ways." "Well, I'd love to learn all." "Your ways of communicating," Maya said, crouching to his eye level. "Should we go find your dad after his call and make a plan for our days together?" Theo nodded enthusiastically. By lunchtime, Maya had created a schedule that included disguised therapy exercises for Theo and coaching sessions for Richard. She'd been surprised to find a whiteboard in Theo's playroom with Maya's methods written. At the top, Richard was clearly serious about learning from her. "I thought we could start with some swimming," Maya suggested, reviewing her ideas with Richard. "The water supports Theo's movements and makes physical therapy more fun." Richard frowned. "The doctors said his condition makes swimming risky." "Did they?" Maya asked. "Or did they say unsupervised swimming was risky? There's a difference." The challenge in her voice made Richard pause. "I suppose they specified unsupervised." "And he won't be unsupervised," Maya said confidently. "I'm a certified lifeguard, and you'll be right there with us. The physical benefits are tremendous, and Theo told me on his device that he loves the water." "He did?" Richard looked surprised, then thoughtful. "I never asked him." That afternoon found them in the heated indoor pool. Maya showed Richard how to support Theo in the water, guiding his movements without doing everything for him. Theo's joy was infectious as he splashed and floated, his body freer in the water than on land. "I haven't heard him laugh like this since—" Richard's voice caught. "Since before we lost Elise. He's still the same boy she loved," Maya said gently. "He just needs different ways to express himself." Days turned into weeks as their routine took shape. Mornings began with Theo showing Maya something new: a bird at the feeder, a Lego creation, a picture he'd drawn. After breakfast, they would do therapy exercises disguised as games, with Richard joining when he wasn't on business calls. Maya started her online nursing classes, setting up a dedicated study space in the cottage. True to his word, Richard respected her education time, never interrupting her scheduled study hours except for emergencies. Theo flourished under their combined care. He began using his communication device more effectively, revealed artistic talents his specialists had never discovered, and showed more physical coordination than Richard had thought possible. But the most remarkable transformation was in Richard himself. Under Maya's guidance, he learned to interpret Theo's expressions, to recognize the patterns in his movements, to meet his son where he was rather than expecting Theo to bridge the gap alone. One evening, Richard found Maya asleep in the chair beside Theo's bed, an open storybook in her lap. Theo had had a small seizure earlier. Nothing serious, but frightening nonetheless. Maya had stayed with him until he fell asleep, clearly intending to just rest her eyes a moment. Richard stood in the doorway, watching them both. The fierce protectiveness in Maya's posture, even in sleep, sent an unexpected wave of emotion through him. She cared for Theo beyond their arrangement, beyond the paycheck. She cared because he was Theo, because he mattered to her. When was the last time anyone had cared about something in Richard's life without an ulterior motive? He was still pondering this question the next day when his business partner, Marcus, arrived unannounced, concern etched into his features. "You've missed 3 board meetings," Marcus said without preamble, following Richard into his home office. The Singapore deal is stalling, and the developers are threatening to walk if we don't break ground by month's end. Richard frowned. I've been on every critical call. Being physically present matters, Richard, Marcus insisted. The board is questioning your commitment. And who is this woman Janice tells me is living in the guest house? Some waitress you've hired to watch Theo? Before Richard could answer, they heard laughter from the garden. Through the window, they could see Maya and Theo planting flowers in raised beds specially designed for his wheelchair access. That some waitress has done. More for my son in a month than an army of specialists did in 2 years, Richard said quietly. Marcus studied the scene, his expression calculating. Just be careful, he warned. A pretty young woman suddenly interested in a wealthy widower and his son. It's a tale as old as time. Maya's not like that, Richard snapped, surprised by his own defensiveness. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Perhaps not, but I'd hate to see you or Theo get hurt when she inevitably moves on. The seed of doubt had been planted, and Richard couldn't help but wonder if there was truth in Marcus's warning. I need everything you can find on Maya Chen, Marcus said into his phone as his driver navigated the winding road down from Cedar Hill. School records, employment history, family background, everything. Marcus had built his fortune alongside Richard by being cautious, by seeing threats others missed, and something about the young waitress turned caretaker didn't sit right with him. Richard had never been vulnerable. Not until he lost Elise. Now, with Theo's condition and Richard's obvious guilt about being an absent father, he was the perfect target. Maya, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware of Marcus's suspicions. Her days fell into a comfortable rhythm of caring for Theo, studying for her nursing classes, and teaching Richard how to better connect with his son. The cottage by the lake had become more of a home to her than anywhere she'd lived since her father died. Watch how he taps his fingers when he's excited but can't find the words, she explained to Richard as they observed Theo with his art therapist. That's his way of saying he wants to continue an activity. Richard nodded, mentally, adding this to his growing list of Theo translations, as he called them. These small insights Maya provided were worth more than he could ever repay. But since Marcus's visit, a shadow of doubt had crept into Richard's mind. He found himself watching Maya more critically, questioning her motives when she stayed late, to comfort Theo after a nightmare, wondering if her enthusiasm for his progress was genuine or calculated. These thoughts made him ashamed, yet they persisted, especially when Maya began excelling in her nursing program, her dedication to her studies sometimes taking precedence over her time with Theo. I have midterms this week, she explained apologetically one evening when she couldn't join them for dinner. I need every spare minute to study. Richard nodded stiffly. Of course, your education comes first, as we agreed. Alone with Theo at the dinner table, he couldn't help but notice his son's downcast expression. She'll be back tomorrow, he assured. Him. Theo used his communication device. Maya promised to help with my science project. I can help with that, Richard offered, feeling a pang of jealousy at how easily Theo turned to Maya instead of him. Theo looked doubtful, but nodded. 2 days later, Marcus arrived at the Cedar Hill house again, this time with a file folder tucked under his arm. We need to talk, he said gravely, once they were alone in Richard's office. Richard eyed the folder. What is that? Information about Ms. Chen, Marcus replied, opening it on the desk. Her mother abandoned the family when Maya was 7. Father raised her alone until he died when she was 16. After that, she bounced between foster homes until she aged out of the system. Richard frowned. How is any of this relevant? Look at her financial history, Marcus continued, ignoring the question. Constant instability. Never more than a few $100s in her account at any time. 3 loan applications denied in the past 2 years. She's been working minimum wage jobs while trying to pay for school, Richard countered. Of course, her finances are tight. The point is, Marcus pressed, she's a young woman who has never had security, who grew up without parental support, and who suddenly finds herself living in the guest house of one of the wealthiest men in the country. He paused meaningfully. A man with a vulnerable, motherless child. Richard stood abruptly. You're out of line. Am I? Marcus challenged. Or am I just saying what you've already been thinking? Richard, I've known you for 20 years. I can see the doubt in your eyes when you look at her. Trust your instincts. After Marcus left, Richard stood by the window watching Maya and Theo in the garden. She was helping him plant bulbs for spring flowers, patiently guiding his hands in the soil. The scene looked idyllic, loving. Was it all an act? The next morning, Maya noticed an immediate change in Richard's demeanor. His warmth had vanished, replaced by cool professionalism. He scheduled a business trip to the city, leaving Ms. Patel in charge of Theo while Maya was in classes. Is everything okay? Maya asked, catching him as he prepared to leave. Fine, he replied curtly. Just business that requires my personal attention. Maya frowned, unconvinced. Theo was looking forward to showing you his progress in the pool today. Ms. Patel can observe instead, Richard said, not meeting her eyes. I'll be back in 3 days. When Richard returned, the distance between them had only grown. He was polite but reserved, scheduling fewer family activities and more private. Time with just him and Theo. Maya couldn't understand what had changed, but she felt the chill acutely. Finally, after a week of this treatment, Maya confronted him in his office. Have I done something wrong? She asked directly. Richard looked up from his laptop, his expression unreadable. Why would you ask that? Because you've barely spoken to me in days. Because you're pulling away from the progress we were making. Maya crossed her arms. If I've overstepped somehow, I deserve to know. Richard's jaw tightened. I simply think we became too casual in our professional relationship. Professional relationship? Maya echoed, hurt evident in her voice. Is that all this is to you? A business arrangement? Isn't that what you insisted upon? Richard countered coldly. You were quite clear that you weren't interested in being part of this family, only in securing funding for your education. The unfairness of the accusation struck Maya like a physical blow. That's not true, and you know it. I care about Theo. I thought... She shook her head. I thought you understood that. I understand that money solves most problems, Richard replied, his voice hard. But perhaps not all of them. Maya stared at him, suddenly seeing the wall of privilege that separated them, a wall she had foolishly thought they'd breached. You're right about one thing, Mr. Harrington, she said quietly. Money doesn't solve everything. Connection does. And you've just broken ours. She turned and walked out, tears stinging her eyes. In her cottage, she began packing her bags, even as Theo's heartbroken cries echoed from the main house when he learned she was leaving. The Cedar Hill house felt empty without Maya. Her absence hung in the air like a physical thing, noticeable, in every room, every activity, every meal. Theo refused to use his communication device, retreating into silence that no specialist could penetrate. Ms. Patel tried every technique in her extensive professional toolkit, but Theo remained withdrawn, his eyes constantly drifting toward the cottage where Maya had lived. Richard threw himself into work, scheduling back-to-back video conferences that left no time for dwelling on the hollow feeling in his chest. He Told himself it was better this way. Cleaner, more professional. No emotional entanglements to complicate what should have been a straightforward arrangement. But at night, alone in his study, he would find himself staring at the Maya's Methods whiteboard, his fingers tracing her handwriting, remembering how easily she had bridged the gap between him and his son, a gap that now felt wider than ever. "Mr. Harrington?" Ms. Patel stood in the doorway, her expression concerned. "Theo won't eat again. He's asking for Maya." Richard sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'll talk to him." In Theo's room, he found his son curled on his bed, facing the wall. Richard sat on the edge of the mattress, placing a gentle hand on Theo's shoulder. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. "Ms. Patel says you're not hungry, but you need to eat to keep up your strength." Theo didn't respond. "Theo, please. I know you're upset, but—" Theo suddenly rolled over, grabbing his communication device. His fingers moved rapidly across the screen, tapping with more force than necessary. The computerized voice spoke. "You made Maya go away. She was teaching you how to understand me. Now you're not trying anymore." The accusation hit Richard like a physical blow. "That's not true," he protested. "I understand you." Theo shook his head vigorously, typing again. "Not like Maya did. Not like you were learning to." He put the device down and made a series of gestures with his hands. Gestures Maya had taught them both. A simple sign language they'd developed together. Richard stared, recognizing some of the motions, but not comprehending the full message. Frustration and grief washed over him as he realized Theo was right. Without Maya, he was losing his connection to his son. The progress they'd made was slipping away. Theo picked up his device again. "I love you, Dad." The simple message broke something open in Richard's chest. His eyes burned with tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed since Elise died. "I love you too, Theo," he whispered, "more than anything in this world." Theo made another gesture, one Richard did recognize. It was their sign for Maya. "You miss her," Richard acknowledged. Theo nodded emphatically. "So do I," Richard admitted, surprising himself with the truth of it. That night, Richard sat alone in his office, Maya's personnel file open on his desk. He stared at the background check. Marcus had ordered, at the cold facts of her life laid out in black and white. Mother abandoned family when subject was 7 years old. Father, Chen, Michael, deceased, heart attack. Subject entered foster care system at 16. Limited financial resources. No family support network. The facts hadn't changed, but Richard's interpretation of them had. Where Marcus had seen a desperate young woman looking for security, Richard now saw someone who had faced tremendous adversity with courage and determination. Someone who, despite having every reason to be bitter, had shown nothing but kindness and patience to a boy who reminded her of her own difficult childhood. His video call chimed, interrupting his thoughts. It was Marcus, checking on the Singapore deal. "We're ready to break ground next week," Richard reported mechanically. "The permits cleared yesterday." "Excellent," Marcus replied. "And how are things with the waitress? Has she tried to contact you since you let her go?" Richard frowned. "Her name is Maya, and I didn't let her go. She left because I behaved like an idiot." Marcus sighed. "Richard, you did the right thing. She was the best thing that happened to Theo since we lost Elise," Richard interrupted. "And I drove her away because I was too afraid to trust that someone might actually care about us without an agenda." On his desk, Richard's phone buzzed with a notification. It was from Theo's education app, a message from his son, sent from his room. It was a drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands, a tall one labeled Dad, a small one in a wheelchair, labeled Me, and a third one labeled Maya, with a large question mark above her head. In that moment, everything became clear to Richard. He knew what he had to do, even if he wasn't sure Maya would forgive him. What he didn't know was that across town, in her tiny apartment, Maya had just received a mysterious envelope containing an acceptance letter to the state's most prestigious nursing program, along with notification of a full scholarship she had never applied for. Maya stared at the scholarship letter in disbelief. Full tuition, books, housing stipend, everything covered for the entire nursing program. The letterhead belonged to the Harrington Foundation, but a handwritten note attached to it read, "This was not Richard's doing. Your application was selected by our independent committee based on merit and need. Congratulations." It was signed by the Foundation's director, someone Maya had never heard of. She should have been ecstatic. This was the opportunity of a lifetime, the very thing she'd been working toward for years. Yet all she felt was a hollow ache when she thought about celebrating this news without Theo's enthusiastic high fives or Richard's quiet pride. 3 weeks had passed since she'd left Cedar Hill. She'd returned to her old apartment, picked up shifts at the diner, and tried to forget the family who had briefly made her feel like she belonged somewhere. But Theo's face haunted her dreams, and the memory of Richard's cold dismissal still stung like an open wound. The diner's familiar routine offered little comfort. Regular customers welcomed her back, but Maya moved through her shifts mechanically, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. "Table 3 is asking for you specifically," Doris said one rainy Tuesday afternoon. "Said they won't talk to anyone else." Maya glanced toward the corner booth and froze. Theo sat there in his wheelchair, clutching a homemade card, with Richard standing awkwardly beside him. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she slowly approached their table. "Hi, Theo," she said softly, her eyes filling with tears at his beaming smile. He thrust the card toward her. Inside, in wobbly letters clearly written by Theo himself with help, it read, "We miss you. Please come talk to us." "5 minutes," Richard said, his voice rough with emotion. "Just give us 5 minutes, Maya." They settled into the booth, an echo of their first meeting in this very spot. Theo positioned his wheelchair where he could see both adults, his eyes darting anxiously between them. "I didn't arrange that scholarship," Richard began, "but I'm not surprised you received it. You deserve it more than anyone I know." "Thank you," Maya replied stiffly. "Is that all you came to say?" Richard shook his head. "I came to apologize. I let Marcus put doubts in my head about your intentions. I convinced myself you were using us, because that was easier than admitting how important you'd become to both of us." He glanced at Theo. "To all of us." Maya kept her expression neutral. "You made it very clear that our arrangement was purely professional, Mr. Harrington." "Richard," he corrected quietly. "And I was wrong. So terribly wrong." He reached across the table, not quite touching her hand. "You taught me how to be a father to my son. You showed me what Theo is capable of when someone truly believes in him. You gave us both a gift that no amount of money could ever buy." Theo tapped on his communication device. "I learned the signs we made together. Dad is learning them too now." Maya's resolve began to crumble as Theo demonstrated, his small hands forming the gestures they'd created together. "He refuses to work with any other therapists," Richard added. "He says they don't understand him like you do." "Theo needs consistency," Maya said, slipping automatically into caretaker mode. "He thrives on routine and familiar faces." "It's not just Theo who needs you," Richard admitted, vulnerability plain in his eyes. "I need you too." Maya's breath caught. What are you saying, Richard? I'm saying that my house hasn't been a home since you left. I'm saying that I was a fool to listen to anyone else's opinion about what's best for my family. He paused, gathering courage. I'm saying that I'd like you to come back, not as an employee, but as a friend, someone who cares about Theo and who might, someday, care about me too. Maya sat silently, processing his words. The scholarship is yours regardless, Richard added quickly. No strings attached. We just want you in our lives again. Theo reached across the table and took Maya's hand, his eyes pleading. There's something else you should know, Richard said, his voice softening. Something I discovered when trying to understand why you connected so deeply with Theo from the beginning. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a newspaper clipping from 7 years ago, a feature about a hospital program that provided specialized treatments for children whose families couldn't afford care. Your foster brother, Jamie, Richard began. You gave up your college, savings to help pay for his therapy when you were 18. Maya's eyes widened. How did you know about that? I spoke with your former foster mother, Mrs. Reeves. She told me everything. How you worked 3 jobs, how you slept on the hospital couch for weeks. Richard's voice grew thick with emotion. The program that eventually covered Jamie's treatment, it was funded by the Harrington Foundation. My company has supported that hospital for over a decade. Maya stared at him in disbelief. I'm saying that you were helping my foundation's children long before you helped my son, Richard finished. We were connected before we ever met, Maya. Maybe that's why you understood Theo from the first moment. You'd already fought for children like him. The revelation washed over Maya like a wave, connecting pieces of her life in ways she'd never imagined. The coincidence seemed too perfect, too meaningful to ignore. Will you come home with us? Richard asked softly. Not as an employee, as family. Maya looked from Richard to Theo, seeing hope in both their eyes. She thought about the scholarship, about her dreams, about the connection she'd found with this unlikely family. On one condition, she said finally. Richard nodded, ready to agree to anything. Promise me that Theo will always come first, Maya said firmly. Before business deals, before board meetings. Promise me that you'll be the father he deserves, with or without my help. Richard reached across the table, taking her hand in his. I promise, he said, with the same certainty he'd once reserved for billion-dollar business deals. Some things are worth more than money, Maya. You taught me that. As they left the diner together, Maya realized that sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as challenges. And sometimes family is found in the most unexpected places. That was the end of our story. Where are you listening from today? If you enjoyed this heartwarming tale about connection, understanding, and finding family in unexpected places, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like this one. Don't forget to share with your friends and family to help spread kindness and awareness about disabilities and the power of compassion. Every share makes a difference. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.